off the port. They never have the chance to come back into our country. We inherited that border from an incompetent administration and turned it.
This is a developing story. Federal agents launched a coordinated raid on the central shipping port this morning, uncovering a sophisticated corruption scheme.
4:17 a.m. Newark, New Jersey. Federal agents surrounded a nondescript office building 3 blocks from Port Newark Container Terminal. Inside, a man with diplomatic credentials and customs authority over billions in annual cargo had been living 2 lives. By dawn, investigators would seize 3.9 tons of pure narcotics worth $847 million on the street. They would uncover shipping manifests linking 23 separate container routes to cartel pipelines spanning 4 continents, and they would arrest a Port Authority director whose signature appeared on documents that allowed enough fentanyl to kill every person in 6 states. This was not a customs violation. This was industrial-scale narcotics trafficking hidden inside America's busiest shipping corridor. Let me show you how deep this betrayal went. Hit like so this story reaches people who still believe our ports are secure. For 18 months, the FBI's Transnational Organized Crime Task Force had been tracking anomalies in container inspection records at Port Newark. Not missing shipments, not stolen goods, something more sophisticated. Containers flagged by automated drug detection systems were being manually overridden and cleared without physical inspection. The override codes trace back to a single terminal. The authorization signatures belonged to one man, Ahmed Hassan Noor, Director of Cargo Operations for the Port of Newark Maritime Division, a Somali American with 22 years of federal employment, Level 4 security clearance that granted him access to customs databases, inspection schedules, and real-time manifests for every container entering the eastern seaboard's largest port complex. Noor's background appeared flawless. Immigrated to the United States in 1997 as a political refugee, earned degrees in logistics and international trade, rose through Port Authority ranks with commendations for efficiency improvements that reduce container processing times. Married, 3 children. Home in. Suburban Edison, community leader at a local Somali cultural center. On paper, he embodied the American success story, but DEA intelligence analysts reviewing seized cartel communications kept encountering a code name, the Gatekeeper. Intercepted messages referenced a contact inside East Coast port operations who could guarantee clean passage for high-value loads. Payment records showed monthly wire transfers of $180,000 to offshore accounts in Dubai and Mombasa. The money moved like clockwork, first Tuesday of every month, same amount, same routing banks, for 4 years. Comment exposed: if you believe port security is only as strong as the people running it. Federal investigators began surveillance in March 2023. What they documented was not opportunistic corruption, it was systematic criminal infrastructure built inside legitimate government operations. Noor arrived at his office each morning at 6:45 a.m. He conducted normal Port Authority business until 11:30 a.m., attending meetings, reviewing operational reports, supervising inspection teams. But between 11:30 a.m. and 1:15 p.m., during a period he marked as lunch and administrative catch-up, Noor's computer activity showed a different pattern. He accessed the Container Security Initiative database, which tracks high-risk shipments flagged for mandatory inspection. He pulled up specific container numbers. Within minutes, those containers were reassigned to inspection bays staffed by particular customs officers. The containers would be marked inspected and cleared without ever being opened, and they would leave the port within 6 hours, loaded onto trucks operated by logistics companies that existed only on paper. The FBI cross-referenced every container Noor had cleared against shipping manifests and destination addresses. The pattern was surgical. Containers originated from manufacturing hubs in Guangzhou, China, declared as containing industrial textiles, automotive parts, or consumer electronics. They transited through Karachi, Mombasa, or Djibouti, where manifests were altered and shipping company names changed. By the time they reached Newark, the containers appeared to be legitimate commercial cargo from established importers. But the receiving companies had no physical warehouses. The corporate addresses were mail drops in strip malls across New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut. The trucks that collected these containers drove to distribution points in Baltimore, Philadelphia, and the Bronx, where the cargo was broken down and moved into the domestic drug pipeline feeding the Northeast Corridor. Intelligence agencies trace the operation backwards through 9 countries. The manufacturing point was Sinaloa Cartel Labs in Culiacan, Mexico, producing industrial quantities of fentanyl using precursor chemicals smuggled from China. Mexican cartel operatives transported the finished product to Guatemala, where it was loaded onto commercial fishing vessels operating under Honduran flags. These vessels sailed to Somali territorial waters, where the cargo was transferred to container ships controlled by the Al-Shabaab maritime smuggling network. The narcotics were concealed inside legitimate commercial goods, sealed in false bottom containers with proper customs stamps and shipping documentation. The containers entered the global shipping system as legal cargo, and Ahmed Noor ensured they entered American territory without inspection. Type yes if you want to see how federal agents planned the takedown. The scale was staggering. Between January 2020 and March 2024, investigators identified 187 containers that Noor had personally cleared through his override authority. Conservative estimates based on cartel pricing and purity analysis suggested those containers held more than 31 tons of fentanyl, heroin, and methamphetamine over 4 years. Street value exceeded $9.3 billion. The drug supplied distribution networks across 14 states. Overdose death analysis. By the CDC's tracking systems, linked shipments cleared by Noor to fentanyl batches responsible for at least 2,400 confirmed overdose deaths between 2021 and 2023. This was not victimless crime. This was mass poisoning hidden behind maritime logistics. Federal prosecutors examining financial records discovered Noor had received more than $8.6 million in cartel payments since 2019. The money never touched American banks. Wire transfers moved from cartel-controlled accounts in Mexico City to shell companies in Panama, then to cryptocurrency exchanges in Dubai, where they were converted to Bitcoin and transferred to digital wallets Noor controlled through encrypted access. Every month, Noor extracted cash by selling Bitcoin through peer-to-peer exchanges in Newark and Patterson, receiving payments in $100 bills that he stored in a safe deposit box rented under his wife's maiden name at a bank in Jersey City. Investigators later found $1.4 million in cash inside that box, vacuum-sealed in plastic bundles with dates written in black marker indicating the month each payment was received. But Noor was not working alone. The FBI identified 7 additional Port Authority employees and customs officers who were part of the network. Cargo inspectors who signed false inspection reports, logistics coordinators who reassigned containers to specific bays, IT technicians who deleted digital records of override commands, security supervisors who ensured surveillance cameras in certain areas experienced convenient malfunctions during critical timeframes. Each received payments between $15,000 and $40,000 monthly, depending on their role and access level. The conspiracy had penetrated multiple layers of port operations, creating a controlled corridor through which cartel shipments moved with assembly line efficiency. Share this video so more families understand how narcotics reach their communities. The investigation revealed something even more disturbing. Noor had cultivated relationships with officials beyond the port. A detective in the Newark Police Department's narcotics unit had been feeding him intelligence for 2 years. DEA enforcement operations, timing of federal task force investigations, identities of confidential informants. The detective received $25,000 monthly in cash. When arrested at his home in West Orange, agents found $180,000 hidden in his garage, along with burner phones and notes about active federal investigations. Another conspirator was a logistics coordinator at Port Newark who had been responsible for assigning inspection priorities. Her job was to determine which containers received intensive scrutiny and which got expedited clearance. For 3 years, she had ensured cartel containers were marked as low priority, routing them to inspection teams that were either complicit or overwhelmed with high-volume workloads. She received $30,000 monthly deposited into an account opened under her sister's name. When agents searched her home in Bayonne, they found records showing she had purchased a second property in the Dominican Republic and was planning to relocate permanently once she accumulated $2 million in savings. She was 29 years old. She had worked at the port for 5 years, and she had helped poison thousands of people without ever seeing the consequences. The operation was designated Iron Gate. FBI tactical teams, DEA special agents, ICE Homeland Security investigations, and U.S. Customs Enforcement coordinated a simultaneous multi-site strike targeting Noor's office, his residence, the homes of 7 co-conspirators, 4 logistics warehouses suspected of handling cartel cargo, and 6 Port Authority facilities where evidence was stored. The planning took 11 weeks. Intelligence analysts mapped every subject's daily routine. Surveillance teams documented when each location had minimal civilian presence. Tactical coordinators synchronized breach times to prevent any subject from warning others. Federal prosecutors secured warrants for all 23 locations from a magistrate judge who reviewed 800 pages of evidence documenting the conspiracy's breadth. Comment betrayal if you understand why this cuts deeper than ordinary crime. The strike order was issued at 3:30 a.m. on September 12, 2024. Weather conditions were optimal, clear skies, low wind, minimal maritime traffic due to early hour schedules. FBI hostage rescue team operators would hit Noor's office. ICE HSI tactical units would breach the warehouses. DEA enforcement teams would execute warrants at the co-conspirators' residences. Newark Police Department SWAT provided perimeter security. Port Authority police locked down terminal access to prevent anyone from entering or leaving the facility during the operation. Helicopters from the FBI's aviation unit circled overhead. Thermal imaging cameras tracking heat signatures inside target buildings. At 4:17 a.m., battering rams struck 14 doors simultaneously across northern New Jersey. The sound echoed through residential neighborhoods and industrial zones where most occupants still slept. At Noor's office in the Port Authority Administrative Complex, FBI operators breached the entrance with explosive charges that blew the reinforced security door off its hinges. Flashbang grenades detonated inside, filling the hallway with blinding light and concussive noise designed to disorient anyone present. Agents in tactical gear moved through the building with speed and precision, clearing rooms, securing computers, pulling file cabinets open, and photographing contents before anyone could destroy evidence. Noor was not in his office. Agents found him at his home in Edison, a 2-story colonial with a manicured lawn and children's bicycles in the driveway. He answered the door in pajamas, confused and disoriented as federal agents poured past him into the house. His wife screamed. His children, ages 9, 12, and 14, were pulled from their bedrooms and escorted outside while agents searched every room. Inside the master bedroom closet, behind a false panel in the back wall, investigators found a fireproof safe bolted to the floor. The safe contained $340,000 in cash, 3 encrypted smartphones, 2 external hard drives, a 9mm handgun with the serial number filed off, and a ledger written in a combination of English, Somali, and numerical codes. That ledger would become the key to unraveling the full scope of the network. At a warehouse in Kearney, ICE agents discovered what appeared to be a legitimate freight distribution center. Forklifts, pallets, shipping supplies. But in a locked back office, they found something else. A wall-mounted monitor displayed live feeds from 12 cameras positioned throughout Port Newark. The cameras were not official port security equipment. They were privately installed surveillance systems aimed at specific inspection bays, allowing whoever controlled this room to watch in real time which containers were being inspected and which inspectors were on duty. Next to the monitor was a radio transceiver tuned to Port Authority security frequencies, letting operators listen to guard communications. On a desk, agents found printed photographs of every customs inspector and cargo handler working the terminal, with handwritten notes in the margins indicating which were trustworthy and which were problems. If this shocks you, hit like now. The evidence recovered in the first 6 hours was overwhelming. From Noor's office computer, FBI cyber analysts extracted 14,000 emails spanning 4 years, many containing coded language referencing shipments, clients, and clearances. The encryption was sophisticated but not impenetrable. Within 72 hours, analysts had broken the codes and mapped communications to specific container numbers and dates. They found spreadsheets tracking every cartel shipment Noor had cleared, complete with container IDs, arrival dates, contents, destination addresses, and payment amounts. Noor had kept meticulous records of his own criminal enterprise, likely as insurance against the cartel deciding he was expendable. External hard drives seized from Noor's home contained even more damning material. Video files showed Noor meeting with unidentified men in parking lots, hotel rooms, and waterfront locations. Audio recordings captured conversations in Somali, Spanish, and English discussing shipment schedules, payment disputes, and strategies for avoiding detection. Financial records detailed every dollar Noor had received, how it was laundered, where it was stored. Investigators found documentation of real estate purchases Noor had made under shell company names, 3 commercial properties in Newark, a warehouse in Elizabeth, a luxury condo in Miami Beach worth $2.1 million. His official Port Authority salary was $94,000 annually. His actual net worth exceeded $11 million. The ledger from Noor's safe was a roadmap to the entire conspiracy. Each page represented a month. Each entry recorded a specific container, ID number, arrival date, cargo type, destination, payment received. Investigators cross-referenced these entries against port records and found perfect correlation. Every container Noor had listed was one that had been flagged by automated systems as high risk, but then manually cleared without inspection. The ledger included notes about complications, inspections that happened despite Noor's overrides, containers that were late arriving, payments that were delayed. On one page dated February 2023, Noor had written, "Inspector Ramirez asking questions, needs to be reassigned or removed." 2 weeks later, Inspector Ramirez was transferred to a different terminal. Port Authority records showed the transfer request came from Noor's office, citing operational efficiency needs. As FBI agents dug deeper into the network, they identified connections that stretched beyond port operations into law enforcement and government. One of Noor's encrypted phones contained messages with a contact saved as badge. The messages discussed upcoming DEA enforcement operations, timing of federal task force investigations, and identities of confidential informants. Type secured if you believe every port in America needs this level of scrutiny. The warehouses yielded physical evidence that left no room for doubt. At a facility in Elizabeth, agents discovered 3 containers that had arrived the previous week and not yet been distributed. Using K9 units trained to detect narcotics, they inspected the cargo. The dogs alerted on false bottom panels in containers supposedly holding industrial sewing machines from Guangzhou. When agents opened the hidden compartments, they found vacuum-sealed packages of white powder stacked floor to ceiling. Field tests confirmed fentanyl. Laboratory analysis later determined the purity was 94%, indicating production by sophisticated cartel chemists with access to high-grade precursors. The total weight from those 3 containers was 1,847 kilograms. Street value, $203 million. Enough lethal doses to kill 923 million people. Federal prosecutors moved quickly to ensure no evidence was lost and no conspirators escaped. Within 18 hours of the initial raids, 23 people were in federal custody. Charges included conspiracy to import controlled substances, money laundering, bribery of public officials, wire fraud, and operating a continuing criminal enterprise. Ahmed Noor faced 8 federal counts that carried a minimum sentence of 30 years and a maximum of life imprisonment without parole. Prosecutors immediately filed motions to seize all assets purchased with drug proceeds, including Noor's home, vehicles, real estate holdings, and the $1.4 million in the safe deposit box. Federal law allows total forfeiture of any property obtained through proceeds of drug trafficking. Noor's family would lose everything. The arrest sent shockwaves through the Port Authority and law enforcement communities. Port Newark processes more than 3.8 million containers annually, making it the 3rd busiest port on the East Coast. Each container represents legitimate commerce, consumer goods, industrial materials, agricultural products, electronics. The economic value flowing through that single facility exceeds $200 billion per year. And for 4 years, a trusted official with security clearance had turned part of that system into a drug superhighway for Mexican cartels and Somali smuggling networks. Comment your thoughts on how we rebuild trust after corruption this deep. The revelation raised immediate questions about how such a conspiracy could operate undetected for so long, and how many other ports might have similar vulnerabilities. Congressional oversight committees launched investigations. The Department of Homeland Security Inspector General initiated a review of port security protocols nationwide. The Government Accountability Office began an audit of customs inspection procedures at all major container terminals. Within weeks, testimony before the House Committee on Homeland Security revealed systemic failures in vetting and monitoring employees with access to critical infrastructure. Ahmed Noor had undergone background checks when he was hired, and again when he received security clearance upgrades. None detected the offshore accounts, the unexplained wealth, or the pattern of override commands that should have triggered automated alerts. The systems designed to catch exactly this kind of corruption had failed completely. The investigation expanded as federal agents followed the money trails internationally. The cartel payments to Noor originated from financial networks controlled by the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, one of Mexico's most violent and sophisticated criminal organizations. CJ&G had been seeking reliable entry points into the United States for years, investing heavily in corrupting officials at border crossings, airports, and seaports. Noor was one of dozens of assets the cartel had cultivated inside American infrastructure. Intelligence sharing with Mexican authorities revealed CJ&G had similar arrangements with officials in Long Beach, California, and Savannah, Georgia. Those investigations led to additional arrests and exposed the scale of cartel penetration into U.S. port operations. The Somali connection traced back to Al-Shabaab, the terrorist organization controlling significant territory in Somalia and operating one of East Africa's most profitable smuggling networks. Al-Shabaab had diversified from weapons and human trafficking into narcotics, partnering with Mexican cartels to move product through maritime routes that avoided traditional enforcement choke points. The organization used profits from drug smuggling to fund terrorist operations, including attacks in Kenya, Uganda, and Somalia that had killed thousands. By facilitating CJ&G shipments through Port Newark, Noor had indirectly funded terrorism. Federal prosecutors added material support for terrorism to his charges, ensuring even harsher sentencing if convicted. If you believe justice matters, comment justice below. Victims' families began coming forward as the story broke. A mother from Allentown, Pennsylvania, whose 19-year-old son died from a fentanyl overdose in 2022, spoke to news media holding a photograph of her child. She described finding him unresponsive in his bedroom, the desperate attempts at CPR, the paramedics who arrived too late. Toxicology reports showed the fentanyl in his system was 92% pure, matching the profile of batches linked to containers cleared by Ahmed Noor. Her son had purchased what he believed was a prescription painkiller from a dealer who sourced supply from a distribution network in Newark. One pill killed him. The dealer didn't know the pills were poisonous. The distributor didn't know the supply was cartel-grade fentanyl. And Noor never considered that his signature on a clearance form would end in a teenager dying on a bedroom floor in a suburban home 2 hours away. The evidence presented to federal grand juries was irrefutable. Prosecutors laid out timelines showing exact correlations between Noor's override commands and the arrival of containers later found to contain narcotics. They presented financial records proving Noor had received millions from cartel sources. They introduced testimony from cooperating witnesses, including 3 of the 7 arrested port employees who agreed to testify in exchange for reduced sentences. One testified that Noor had recruited him personally, explaining that the containers they were clearing contained high-value merchandise that important people needed to move quickly. When the witness expressed concern, Noor told him, "You can make more in 1 year than you'll see in 20 working for the government, or you can stay poor and watch others get rich." The witness took the money. For 3 years, he signed false inspection reports and collected $15,000 monthly. Ahmed Noor's trial began in March 2025 in federal court in Newark. The prosecution called 63 witnesses over 4 weeks. FBI agents testified about the surveillance operation and evidence recovery. DEA chemists explained the purity and lethality of seized narcotics. Financial analysts walked jurors through money laundering schemes. Victims' family members described the human cost of addiction and overdose. The defense argued Noor had been coerced by cartel threats against his family, claiming he had received death threats and feared for his children's safety. Prosecutors countered with evidence showing Noor had initiated contact with cartel intermediaries through encrypted messaging platforms, actively seeking the arrangement. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They returned guilty verdicts on all counts. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens. Next, sentencing was scheduled for August 2025. Federal guidelines suggested life imprisonment. Prosecutors requested the maximum, citing the scale of the conspiracy, the amount of drugs trafficked, the deaths linked to those drugs, and the betrayal of public trust. Noor's attorneys filed motions for leniency, arguing his cooperation with ongoing investigations into cartel networks warranted reduced sentencing, but the cooperation was minimal. Noor provided information only about lower-level operatives, refusing to identify cartel leaders or detail the full scope of international connections. Federal agents believed he feared